All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We're doing introduction to CiviCRM Entity development today. My name is Mark Hanna, CTO of Square, maintainer of the CiviCRM Entity module. So basic stuff, and we put these slides in the chat or Civi Mattermost so everybody can look at them view later. There's some code and different things that I wanted to share and make available for everybody, and all these links that we're going to have. So project page, Drupal.org, project/CiviCRM Entity, issue queue for CiviCRM Entity is there, and that's the one we watch and help people out. Primary development does happen on GitHub, and so people contributing want to make PRs to this repo here. Do respond to chat messages in CiviCRM Mattermost. If you want to ask a question, get help that way. And if you have a pressing need and want to get something done very soon, you can contact Square. We can get you on contract to help you out.
And Mark, if I could interject, I'll keep an eye on the Zoom chat. So if anybody has a question along the way, if you want to pop it in the Zoom chat there, we'll go over some questions towards the end of Mark's presentation.
Yeah. So, okay, what is CiviCRM Entity for? Like I would say the majority of people use it for views integration. As of the Drupal 8 version, the standard views integration for CiviCRM is provided by CiviCRM Entity. And many other uses, I'd say most uses is referencing CiviCRM data. So if you have a node, maybe you want to reference a contact, events, other things, you can use Entity reference fields integration, so you can have a UI-based way to respond to a contact being updated, membership being created, different things. The Drupal-based CRUD form, so that's create, read, update, delete. So there's Drupal-based ways to view CiviCRM data or edit that CiviCRM data. But also, and it's kind of the point of this and future webinars, is leveraging a variety of existing modules, because what CiviCRM Entity is doing is providing a wrapper around the CiviCRM API so that and exposing the CiviCRM data to be made available and used by any Drupal API. So all the Drupal Entity API to make it as if it is native to Drupal. And I think that's the real power. So there's really like hundreds of modules that can be leveraged with CiviCRM and CiviCRM Entity to build all kinds of custom functionality. And then, of course, to be able for Drupal developers that want to do things in the Drupal way to do custom module and theme development. So that's the purpose. Real quick installation, use Composer. For Drupal 10, 4.x branch, just Composer required Drupal CiviCRM Entity. If you're wanting to use the GitHub repo, I put a little code snippet in here, so how you can inform Composer to pull in the version of the GitHub repo. It's really stable. Things don't get merged until we feel like we're going to put that in the official Drupal version. So our release cycle is a little bit slow and careful. I think the priority is on not having breaking changes, and so we kind of move slowly. So there are times when there's stuff in the GitHub repo that is not in the Drupal release yet. So if you want to use this dev branch, you want to update your Composer require statement to pull in 4.0.x-dev. So sometimes maybe you're using the Drupal release, Drupal.org release, and or you want to patch things. You know, a PR has been made, maybe it's been merged, maybe it hasn't been merged, but you know you need it, you know you want to apply it. So very useful to use C-Wiggins Composer patches. There's probably already using it or patching other modules, so you just add a patches section to your extra section of your Composer JSON, and it's really easy to choose to make patches out of PRs. All you do is take the PR URL and you add that dot patch to it, it'll automatically redirect to this to a patch address that has this format. So really easy to turn PRs into patches. All the module, it is just like any other module. Go to the module page, use Drush to enable it, and you're ready to go. That's really all you got to do to start. There is a settings page that you may want to visit when you install the module, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what is this settings page, what is the enabling of an entity type. So what does it do for you? When you install, all entity types are technically enabled or available to Drupal. So every entity type that CiviCRM exposes, it will automatically get the views integration. You can use Drupal reference fields, entity reference fields. You can program with Drupal hooks will fire. So enabling really means getting the Drupal CRUD pages. So that means a representation like a view page, like you view a node, you can view a contact, not to be confused with Drupal views. So also edit forms, add forms, and delete pages, like a Drupal version of these pages. I put an example of these pages for the CiviCRM contact. So once you enable, you will get these pages, and you want to be careful. Like, there are permissions for who can view these pages, who can edit these pages, but when you enable it, you're possibly exposing your CiviCRM data to at least some roles, users of some roles in Drupal. So be mindful of that, and that's why we're going to go over that in this presentation. So you wouldn't necessarily just want to expose your entire contact database to everyone, right? So be careful with that. A couple other settings. There's if you go to the bottom, there's a field set, it's advanced settings, disable pre and post hooks. So this stops some of the Drupal's hooks from firing, like when an entity is updated, when it is inserted. We wrote this in really to be able to stop it from happening when we do migrations. So maybe you're running an import, but tons of contacts are created. Maybe you don't want to have those hooks run. And when you get hundreds, thousands, it can use more memory and just generally be slower. So you can turn that off. I put a warning, like, don't do it unless you know you need it, so because certain facilities aren't going to work. For instance, if you add a Drupal field to an entity type, then those fields, the appropriate hooks may not fire. Drupal rules wouldn't work, and there could just be some unintended consequences with all your things. So in general, it's fine. Don't disable it. If you need to, for some reason, it's there to turn off. There's also just a global switch for disabling Drupal pages. So even if you enable the type, you could disable the Drupal versions of views and pages, kind of like a kill switch. Just stop having those pages, you get access denied. So for whatever reason. And then there is up at the top, there's a text format. So certain entity types in the edit forms, like maybe your event summary, your event description, they do accept WYSIWYG. So to get like the CK editor and those types of things, we use that, and then we just hard code like what is the text format that is used, and so you can choose that if you want the basic or more advanced or custom text formats. So how do you know what the permissions will be? So you want to enable an entity type, you want the Drupal pages, but what are the starting permissions? So this is where the documentation for this is the code. There's 35 plus entity types that are enabled, and so it is relatively easy to figure out what the permissions are out of the box for these. And we're going to go over, okay, how do we alter these permissions? So really the best place to look is the code. See the entity type that you're enabling, find it in this code, and you can see here there's a permission sections, view is view, edit and update are editing in different contexts, creating and deleting. We try to make same defaults that are very much similar to what it would be in CiviCRM. ACLs are not applying. There's some particular details that are not the same as it would be in the back end of CiviCRM. So that's why be mindful. Like there may be instances where you give users view all contacts who may not necessarily have access to the back end. So if you're enabling the contact entity type and you give users view all contacts, you may want to use a small bit of custom or something to adjust who can see these pages. So you're not revealing all your contact database to those users. And there's a variety of other ways you can make the display of these contacts like have no fields on them. That's an easy way to not expose data or just a very small amount. So that's okay. There's many other properties in here, and we'll go through some of these. But if anybody takes anything from this, permissions, just be mindful, understand what you're using, what you're getting into with this. So a couple of other points here. If no permissions are specified, you will see in there that there's just like an empty array. The default is administer CiviCRM, right? So that's a fairly elevated permission. Generally, it's only going to be administrator roles. So you can, with nothing there, you can feel fairly safe that you're not revealing information. The view operation applies to any renderings of entities. So there's, what does this word renderings mean? You may have created a Drupal view and you can select the display and you can select how it's like. Oftentimes the default is just fields. So you're adding particular fields to the view. That doesn't count as a rendering, but if you choose to view a view mode of an entity, that's a rendering. If you have an entity reference field and you choose to display the referenced entity and choose a view mode for that, that's a rendering. And if you even just showing the title or the label of an entity is also qualifies as a rendering. So you may be making decisions on when to render based upon the permissions that you have enabled, based upon all the different contexts that you're going to be using. So if you have an entity reference field and you want people to be able to view that, but maybe not the contact pages, you need to consider how to do customs to take into account all the different contexts while you're viewing these things. So in general, unless you want these Drupal view pages of the forms, just don't enable them, and you can use views like normal, and then you're safe. You don't have to worry about that. So these can be modified. You can change the metadata for what CiviCRM Entity uses to provide the integration. So if you want to change the default permissions, there's hook CiviCRM alter Drupal entities, and you can just alter that one operation for the permissions. You can unset. So you could say you could unset the entire CiviCRM contact array and not integrate the contacts should you choose. So that's another way to just block out whole sections. And it depends. Like you have the settings form, maybe you have multiple administrators, maybe you don't even want the option to be there so that nobody can even check the box and accidentally do something. Well, then you can just take it away. So of course, if you unset an entity type here, you will lose the views integration. So this is required for views integration. So be mindful of that and create your strategy for what makes sense for your total use case. You can set an array of permissions also. Maybe a user needs multiple permissions to be able to perform an operation, and that can be done. So in a Drupal module or an extension, this can be done in an extension. You don't have to have a Drupal module for this particular bit. And CiviCRM Entity discovers that hook in CiviCRM extensions. You can also add an entity type. So maybe you have custom tables, custom CiviCRM entities or managed entities, and those can be integrated with Drupal. And by doing so, you get free rules integration, views integration, all that stuff for your entity type. So it's a simple way to get a lot of Drupal functionality for your CiviCRM entity. You need a few things. You need an API 3 right now. So you have to have an API 3 for that. You need an auto incrementing numeric ID column. You need get fields and create operations. So these are like the basic API operations that are required for CiviCRM entity to become aware and to be useful. So you may be writing custom modules. How do I use just existing CiviCRM API stuff? It's really simple. There's a Drupal service. This is actually in CiviCRM core, and you simply load that service and run the initialize method. This will bootstrap CiviCRM in such a way as the module and the site can discover the objects and execute those. A common thing that people need to do is just execute a query, direct query, the CiviCRM way. And this is an easy way to get into that. Prefix your objects with the backslash. Like, it may work without it, but you can run into situations where it won't be able to discover that object, and you could have like an error from that. So just prefix with that, and you're good to go. CiviCRM Entity has an API service. So this is a wrapper around that API, and you can use this anywhere in your Drupal modules if you want to use an object-oriented approach. It's also, I think, good to use this because future versions of CiviCRM Entity will switch to API 4 eventually. So maybe you can write your code with this service and not need to change anything later. So abstraction from that. This works the same. You can see that there's, if you're familiar with the CiviCRM API 3 function, you're still giving it an entity type, the same as you would in CiviCRM extension. You're just not providing the operation as a parameter to the method. And the parameters array is the same as you would use in the normal CiviCRM API. So all the same, the return value is very much the same, except for you don't have, it just gives you the contents of the values array. So you don't have to dig in and say, I want the result values. That's assumed you get those values. So start getting into the more Drupal stuff. So if you're developed in Drupal at all, you're going to be used to using the entity API. And so just as if you were working with nodes, products, other things, you can use the same API to do items with CiviCRM Entity. I provided this link. It's kind of like the starting point for using the Drupal Entity API. Provides a lot of examples. I put a couple here. This is just loading the entity object. So this is the Drupal entity object. And it is the CiviCRM entity object is a content entity. It implements that or extends that. So very similar to a node, but then of course there is custom code put into that for different facilities. If you need to get a field value, so maybe you want to get the content type. This is the Drupal way of how you would get a field value. You can use the get method, field name, and then there's multiple ways to get the actual value. This is one way to get the raw contact type. And you can create a contact the Drupal way. So same as you would a node, same thing, entity type manager, choose your entity type here, in this case, contact, pass in the property names, field names, and save it. So that's very standard if you're used to working with a node. Okay, so I wanted to move on and we can talk about views and talk about, I think, things that are not talked about very often are the Drupal pages and what these things are available. I put in here entity reference fields and rendered entities, but there are also these view pages. And this is interesting because you can start to do things a very Drupal way, and Drupal's very good at presenting information, right? The theme engine is fantastic. You can do a lot of things. You do have these manage display forms where you can organize what the order of the fields, which field formatters do you want to have the field label in line or above, and use field groups. You can get into layout builder. You can use display suite. There's all these Drupal tools that you're used to, and all that stuff works very good. So I'm going to show an example at some point. So you can use the Drupal theming. So in the module of CiviCRM Entity is a basic template for the Twig template for, and it's actually entity type. So that you can take this file, copy it to your theme directory, change the name to follow this format. CiviCRM-entity entity type. Now that's always the full name, so it'd be like CiviCRM-contact. And then the view mode, if you just want to theme the view page, like the /CiviCRM-contact/ID, then it's full mode. You can make additional view modes, use them in your entity reference fields, use them in your Drupal views, and you can then theme the template however you want. So if you want to access like a raw value of the property, maybe not the field, maybe not the entire field. Like what I mean is like the entire label. If you just want the raw value, you can dig into that with Twig. So if you're familiar with Drupal theming, it's very much the same as anything else. There's always like 6 ways to get at things in there, so you can use what you're used to. I put an example here that I'll show for the page, and I'm not saying put hard-coded style tags in your template. I just did this so I could, like in 15 minutes, so I could show it. And somebody was in Mattermost asking me how to do thoughts about a template where the labels were all the same width, so it's kind of nice grid. And this is really quick and easy to do in a Drupal theme template. So you could have like your view could render a view mode of the contact. You can create your template, and you can output that information that you want quickly in the Twig template. And I think you try it once, you see, especially for smaller or simple things, it's quite easy. And maybe you only want a few fields here. Okay, that's fine. You can this bottom bit here where it says content without these, you could just delete that. You could have your 5 fields. You could output it. You can put the HTML however you want. Put your style in your theme, but not necessarily hard coded here. So maybe I'll switch out, and so this is the same thing. So this is Drupal contact page. I'm up at here, and this template just outputs everything neatly. And so by default, the Drupal it just depends on your theme and how styled. It didn't have these labels the same width. Maybe you want that, and you can do things like that. And this is like 30 minutes. It's not hard, and it just works. So you make your theme template, and you clear the caches afterwards. So you need, unless you disable caches. So I wanted to put a code snippet in here for people. There's a cool module, image cache external. Thing I hear about is how do I use like the contact image, but I want to use Drupal image styles. So there's this module, image cache external, and then you can put a little code snippet in your template. There's other ways to engage this module. It can be done in theme preprocess, but it can be done just as easily here in the Twig template. And so this will say you have a very large contact image, but you want to show the little small thumbnail. So the image styles, Drupal will actually generate smaller images or images of different sizes, depending on how you configure it. So when your users view the page, they're not downloading the huge image. They can just have the image for the right size, just like all the other Drupal image fields are in Drupal. Theme preprocess is a starting point if you use this a lot. So like contacts, maybe you want to output all the addresses or the websites for a particular contact. You want to get that into your theme template. So how do I display all the contacts websites? You can start off with something like this in your theme. name of theme, pre-processed CiviCRM entity. Then I'm just checking, okay, what's the entity type, contact, all right, which view mode, that's optional depending on what you're doing. Then just as here is how to access the contact. Then you can use the Drupal API service, fetch all the websites, get the websites, put them in a variable, and then that variable. So like here, I have a variable's contact ID. That means in my tweak template, the variable contact ID will be there, and I could output that. And that's the same for any data that you want to pass to your tweak template. So very useful for making more complex pages. And of course, this is cached too, so Drupal will cache these things. Another great feature of Drupal and reason to use theming. There's a couple of other simple things I think could help people using the display. So all the fields on the CiviCRM entities are proper Drupal fields, but they are what are called base field definitions. So if you go to the manage fields page, and maybe it's worth showing. So if I go to CiviCRM Entity, and you'll see these are the ones that we have enabled. And manage fields, you'll see there's nothing listed here, right? So these are user-defined fields. You can add Drupal fields. So if you want to put a media reference field, audio, video, do some things that maybe is difficult to do in CiviCRM, you can add Drupal fields, and those will be available on your displays. To edit those fields, you do have to edit via the Drupal forms. It will not be showing up on the back end of like the contact summary page. Could be made to be done there with some effort, but it is available. So what I mean by this is if I click the edit form here, now I've modified this edit form just to put some field groups to show how you can make a custom little contact edit form. And you could add your Drupal fields here and put them wherever you want. And this is really good for just little custom situations. Maybe you want your admins or content creators to be able to create a contact or to edit the name or a smaller bit of an entity, but you don't want to give them or train them to use the back end of CiviCRM. So whether it's this edit form or whether it's an entity reference inline entity form, which a little broken right now, but without too much effort can be made to work. And you can do that. So the base fields. So base fields have a standard API in Drupal. They're set up very much the same. You can alter these base fields for how the settings for what is used to choose a widget or choose the field formatter or different settings. So I thought this one was really useful than we've used in the past, where maybe we're showing a little information about a contribution to the user in a Drupal context, and we want to prefix the total amount with the number sign. So it can be simply done by altering the base field info. We're setting a setting of the prefix. You can have the suffix. There's a whole range of settings here. It's probably worthy of its own webinar. I just want to point this out that this can be done, and I've put the link to the hook documentation here. And Drupal's documentation leaves something to be desired on this topic. In many ways, the best thing to do is to see other fields and other usages and look at the code of CiviCRM Entity itself, how it's setting up these base field definitions, and to learn about it. I think you find there's a lot of power here. So let me go back to this. Extra fields. It's another relatively simple way to add additional information for your display. So in this example, I just say you want a message field, right? It could be the same message every time. It could be programmatically generated. So you can use what are called extra fields, basically just computed fields, no data stored in the database. But in other ways, they're the same as other fields. So they'll be available on your display listings where you can arrange what the order they are. You can put them in field groups. You can use them on views. So a relatively quick and simple way to get more data onto the displays you want. So I talked a little bit earlier about the websites. So maybe you want to have your template and your pre-process. You load all the context websites. You could do that same thing with an extra field and configure where in the order of the display of the fields that you put those. So I put the links to these hooks right here. You just need to define the extra fields. And that's what this first one is, info here. And then you need to implement hook entity type view where you can populate the data for that field. And in this case, it was only for organization contacts. And this you're checking to see if that field is defined there with the Git component. So this uses Drupal build arrays. So here was a type markup. There's like a type of URL if you wanted to do a link. And if you use Drupal build arrays, you'll be familiar with all your options there. And that's all you need to do, because this build variable is passed by reference. So that'll put a custom message with a message field that's available on your managed display pages. Access control. So this is important in the sense that maybe you do want your contacts displayed. Sometimes you do. Just recently, we had a website where we wanted organization contacts to be presented to the public so they could have a display, but we didn't want to reveal any individual or household contacts. So we could do custom access control with these. This is just the same as you would do with any nodes or other entity types, and you can do it. Here, I'm going to provide an example, but if you the documentation hook entity type access, so it'd be like hook CiviCRM _ contact access. And then if you want to control access to the entity reference fields just themselves, so maybe you want to have pages to have more access to the pages itself, but less access to the entity reference fields. So you could give looser restrictions on the pages themselves and then tighten it up for particular reference fields. So again, maybe you want only users of a certain role to view the rendering of a entity reference field. So here's an example that I talked about, the organization contact. This is a slightly different than, but I wanted to put in all these possibilities. So what's the operation? You can do view, update, delete, and add for your different operations. And in this case, we wanted to just allow anyone to view the organization contact. And this actually overrides the default permissions of view all contacts for all contacts in general. So we actually wanted a looser restriction for some contact types, but tighter for others, right? So then we just check to see if the entity has a contact type and what is the value of the contact type, and then allow or forbid. And then if your module is not making a decision, if the criteria don't meet or to deny or allow access, you can just return neutral and just let other code make decisions on whether somebody should have access to that. As an example for the field list, the field access for entity reference fields. So this is viewing, so like viewing the rendering of an entity reference field. What's the field name? And then here we're like, if the user's not authenticated, we're going to forbid. So then only authenticated users would have a chance of viewing, because this here then returns neutral to let other modules make a decision about whether they can view that or not. Or in this case, it's more like the user would have view all contacts. So it's kind of the point of this and what I want to talk about. Like if you're a Drupal developer and you already know all these things about Drupal, then and you want to use CiviCRM Entity and you want to build custom stuff, then this is the module you want to use, because it's all there. Everything you're used to is all available. Standard entity objects, theming, modules, everything. So I mean that's the message. So I wanted to give y'all something too. This is a little more difficult to present, but an example of just a useful module out there in the world that people like to use. They will use in the context of other entity types. So that's views bulk operations. Views bulk operations let you perform actions on rows in view. So maybe you want to add, maybe you have a view listing contacts and you want to add the contacts you choose to a group. That action is available in the module, but there's only one, and I put that there just mainly as an example to show people like you can build your custom situations. This could be like create an activity for a contact. This could be I want to update a custom field for a contact. Like add a membership, look at their membership, and do something else. There's a variety of use cases, and I think once you look at how the plugin works, it's relatively simple to make any numbers of these because you're basically provided the infrastructure you need for the plugin, and then you change a few bits of lines of code, and away you go. So the best way to learn how to write plugins is to look at other plugins, copy it, and fiddle with them, right? So that's the case for field formatters, rules, conditions, pretty much anything, and go find a module that already does basically want to do for another entity type, take a look at it, see how to modify it to work at this. I kind of want to look at the code here, so I'm going to exit out of this because it's relatively simple. So you don't necessarily have to know everything about how this works or anything. There's just a few things you need to change, right? So this is in the CiviCRM Entity module, and I gave y'all, there's actually I made an example here for everybody to use, and we're gonna give the slides so you can see these out. So I just want to compare these two and what changed for me to create a plugin in like an hour or less. So the original was I wanted to have a list of contacts. How can I add those to a group? And then it makes sense to have the ability to tag a contact. So I made a tag a contact views bulk operations. I'll show the view here in a second, or maybe I should show it so you can see. Just to be clear about what it is I'm talking about. So made this view. This view lists the contacts. And you'll see here the checkboxes along the side. So this is to be able to perform operations on this, on each of these contacts. And so you get your plugin and you add the views bulk operations, and these operations become available. Here's tag contact, and this is the one that comes with CiviCRM Entity, add contact to group. So, okay, so this one exists. I want to make one that's very similar. What do I got to do? There's a few things to change in here, and you can basically use almost all of it. So you're gonna make a custom module, and you're gonna copy this, you're gonna change the name of the file, and you're gonna put it in the correct location, which is source plugin action. So in Drupal, generally any plugin is going to be in the same directory structure, and then source plugin, and then depending on the type of plugin will be the next directory. In this case, it's an action. So we'll put it in the action directory. We need to change our namespace. So this plugin is in the CiviCRM Entity module. So the namespace is CiviCRM Entity. So you just change this to the name of your custom module that you're working in. So then we need a machine name, a plugin ID. So you change this. This needs to be unique. You can't have it two actions with the same name. Add contact to group. This is the label that shows up in the view UI. Change that in this case. And then what entity types is this action for, right? Contact for our example, it's the same contact. So on this first bit, I've put my plugin in the same directory structure, change the name, change the namespace, change this ID, change my label, updated the class name to match the file name. You see these inside. So, okay, so that's so far so good, right? then most of this, maybe you can leave, like this, the constructor could very well be the same. In here, we've got the CiviCRM API service pass through with dependency injection available for use. So then you can make any API calls that you want using that service. Now, there are a few methods that you'll need to update. So there's the execute method. This is the method that runs where when you're when you've already choose what contacts and you hit go, this is what's going to run. So you're going to get the entity. I'm going to have some configuration, and then I'm just going to make my API call. So this one is add a contact to a group. The group exists, the contact exists. I'm just making a group contact record. And so really simple. So you can imagine if you wanted to add an activity for a contact, you could get in here and make your activity. You could have configurations, or what activity type do you want? Maybe different criteria. Maybe there's custom field values. So there's two configuration forms which you can edit. One is the settings form, build configuration form, and if you don't need any settings, you can just delete it. You can just delete the method. You don't need to have it. So this is not required. This form right here. So this is the build pre-configuration form. That actually is the form right here. So in this, I'll choose which tags are even allowed to be used in the view when we're actually operating. Maybe you don't want to let your admins just apply any tag. Maybe you want to give them 3 tags that you want to allow. So that's why we have this form. So the view itself will only give you these 3 options. And I'll show you the page at the end here. So that's that form. Yeah, so in here you can see I just changed this to the entity tag API, changed the execute. I changed this to allow tags. I say what are my tags that are available everywhere. I did have a helper method in here. This is just a utility method that I'm using for my specific business logic. For if you're doing activities or you doing other things, you may have different utility methods or none, depending. So then there's one other method. That's the build configuration form. This configuration form is the actual form when you're using the view. So let's go here and here. Go to the actual page. So if I want to add the tag, I check the thing, select what action I want to do. And when I apply to selective, this form is the configuration form. So I'm now selecting which tag I want to apply to the context. That is build configuration form. So pre-form is the on the view setting page, configuration form when you're using it. And I get that value, pass it on. And the values, the submission of this is passed in and available in the execute function. So I get the configuration of the selected tag. And that's it. So relatively simple once you know where to put the right things. You can have custom access control, who can use this. I think this is fairly powerful enough. Like if the user has permission to update the entity, then they have permission to use this. So anybody that can update contacts can already basically do this adding of the tag. And of course, you can modify this and do custom or special things. So especially when you have the example, there's an example of rules in this module. There's an example of a field formatter. There's views plugins. There's all kinds of stuff already there to start to learn how to use this. And it doesn't have to be in CiviCRM Entity module. Pretty much any modules that provide plugins are going to have examples of those plugins. And more than likely, there's some way to use the CiviCRM data. All right. I think I went a little faster than I wanted to, but I think that's basically it. So let's go through.
That's great, Mark. We do have a question here from Pete. Let me pull it up again.
Let me find the chat here.
Yeah. So Pete says, when you said future versions of CE will use API v4, does that mean in 4.0 when it is a full release or a future 5.x version? Not sure what is seen as future.
Yeah, so that's just an idea thing. I think API 4 is now feature complete or has this feature equivalent to API 3. So it makes sense to move to that soon. You know, work has been starting, a little bit of experimentation. That to me seems like it should be, I doubt it's going to be in the 4.x. We'll make a new version for that, so 5.x. And we'll see how it goes. And maybe at the same time, we need a Drupal 11 version and something like that, right? So I wouldn't say that's coming like immediately or soon, but it's on the radar, should be done eventually.
Okay, thanks, Mark. That's our only question so far. If anyone has anything else, please pop it in the chat here. We've got 10 minutes or so. We can go over other things.
Yeah, I kind of breezed over a lot of things. Let's go ahead and put this link to this in there too, if they want to just have code examples and links to different things. And then, you know, I just wanted a little primer, a little way to get started. I think this is necessary background information for any future topics, more specific topics. So seemed a reasonable starting place. So next time, we can do this like in 2 months from now, something like that. We're going to do CiviCRM Entity rules and do custom events, triggering those events, custom rules condition, custom rules action. And I have some nice examples I can use for this. So you can provide your site builders rules or the tools they need to use these different plugins when they're designing their Drupal rules. Also, if for anybody, I'm open to ideas for like what people want to know, what they use. You know, how are you using your site? What kind of tools would be good to go over? Yeah, yeah, yeah. We use it in production. I mean, it's been alpha for like 5 years. It's kind of like me. CiviCRM Entity 4 is in beta. I'm just like really slow to move it there. So we use it. It's okay. There are some things that I think the reason it's still alpha is that there's the type data, like defining what the types of data are, have like be able to, I don't know if you edit a view and you're trying to discover what variable you need to use for one of your values. It's just a little wonky sometimes. So I think that's the reason why it's not made it in there. For most things, especially if you're capable to build these things, like you're definitely capable to use rule and it's going to be fine, right?
That was a good question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, anything like this stuff, use it, test it, you know, test it for a while. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, Brian's got next session. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first off, like Mark said, slides and this recording and everything. What we'll do is we'll put up in our blog section of our website on square.com. We'll put links in there and then we'll email those out to everyone that signed up for the webinar today. And they won't be like password protected. So if you want to share the page with the recording and everything with your friends, definitely feel free to do so. And we're going to be doing these training sessions the second Tuesday of every month. So I put in here in the Zoom chat, our next one is Tuesday, March 12th. And we're going to be talking about creating CiviCRM contacts from Drupal. So this one will be more geared towards like site builders and website managers, not as much as developers like we talked about today. And we're going to learn various different ways on how you can use the Drupal side of your website to create contacts in CiviCRM. So I put the link there in Zoom again. So registration's open now. Go ahead and sign up.
Let's see if I had a final slide. Did I not? Yeah, okay, that's it. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.